constant state of fear and misery. No youngest me anymore. Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No live in a constant state of fear and misery. No youngest me anymore.
Hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, November 14th, and we're bringing you Block Digest number 140 at block height 550,086. So, what is up?
Oh man, I guess we were just sitting here in anticipation for tomorrow. I mean, a little bit. I mean, I don't really care much.
Anticipation.
Yes, anticipation. I am. I don't really care much, but I'm curious.
Tomorrow.
It's only a day away.
Yeah. No.
It's going to be hilarious. All right. Real quick, though, before we get in, I just wanted to make a comment and correction regarding the commerce block stuff that we covered last show. Their platform actually does not have a pegging mechanism for Bitcoin, which is kind of confusing given that they actually do have their own independent chain aside from asset issuers' own chains, which they actually had a token sale for. But I do still stand by my entire assessment about the trust models between token issuers and it being very pointless to have an independent chain for each asset. But I will be putting a bunch of stuff together and probably going over that in the next episode to dive into the very specific technical details and issues with their system, and then also probably being a little more explicit in the breakdown of the different trust models involved between that and something like Liquid. But I just wanted to get that out of the way before we got started.
I thought your correction was going to be that you're not a real ninja.
Fuck no. I'm a ninja as fuck.
Well, the funniest thing is that, so if anyone else didn't see, we got a bunch of comments from the Commerce Block people below our last show because Shinobi did his whole analysis of it. And one of the points that they kept bringing up, all of these brigaders, was that Shinobi is not a real ninja. He's just pretending to be one by calling himself Shinobi. And that their CEO at Commerce Block is a real ninja because he's trained at some temple. It turned out that actually the CEO that they were speaking of doesn't even call himself a ninja. He says that he does kung fu, which I guess doesn't make him a ninja. So, yeah, apparently there was a battle about who is the real ninja as we're having this battle about what is the real Bcash, which is almost as ridiculous. But, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Just going to a temple and sitting around for a while, like, yeah, you got to live the lifestyle, man. I don't know. That guy, I know his name. It's hard to stay in this world of digital ninja.
Yeah, apparently somebody doesn't understand metaphors. But well, yeah, I don't know. All right, correction and shit talk aside, let's get into it. So first thing today, Ledger Nano has just been caught with a problem with the Ledger Nano S, and they do have a patch pending for it right now. But I do have to say that honestly, at this point, I am just flabbergasted that BTC Chip is still allowed to speak on behalf of the company and that he hasn't personally nuked the entire company's reputation with the way that he handles any kind of security vulnerability or software glitch. It seems like every single time there is an issue with one of their hardware products or their software, he refuses to acknowledge anything. Like, he refuses to take responsibility. He refuses to acknowledge that there is something that put users at risk in whatever way there was, and just consistently downplays it, act like there's no way that this exploit could have been possibly exploited, and half of the time doesn't even issue a warning to users, or give them advice on how to mitigate the fallout from whatever the specific exploit was. And like, honestly, at this point, like, and it's not even really because of any like fundamental issues with the product itself, but am at the point where I'm going to actively start recommending people do not buy the Ledger Nano S instead of just not recommending it to them, because like their CTO's response to any kind of security issue is just so piss poor and inexcusable that I have no faith that if an actual serious problem was found with the product, that he would actually handle it in a responsible way that made users aware of the risks and actually gave them a way to mitigate it. But this specific exploit, though, sorry, Jeannie, I want to get that out of the way real quick. Just kind of been generally ranting. But
yeah, I mean, I have a similar thought, and I don't know if I would go around saying don't use the Ledger devices. I mean, I've had a number. This is now. I mean, I haven't had a run-in with him, but this is like my second or third time, seeing BTC Chips, which I can't remember his real name. He goes by BTC Chip or BT Chip on Twitter. This is like my second or third time seeing him respond to concerns about a vulnerability, which, serious or how much it was exploited, is kind of beside the point, because there hasn't even been enough time to assess whether it has been exploited. And in this case, it would be it's a problem with a lot of the hardware wallets where the main attack vector that they see with these devices is a key compromise or theft issue, but they don't think about data exfiltration, which is what this is about, in terms of third-party websites being able to exfiltrate your public key, which could then be used to, look at what coins you own and stuff. So it's an infosec problem, not a key security specifically problem. And that's a problem I see with all the hardware wallets. But when something like this is brought up, I feel like, or any of the other vulnerabilities that have been brought up, I feel like they're always downplayed. There's no, I don't see an effort to just say, okay, we're going to deal with this and move on, and here's how you mitigate it. Yeah, I mean, if you want to see what the exploit is, I can bring it. Shinobi, I'll send you the where did it go? Actually, I don't have the GitHub issue, but basically, yeah, it'll allow a third-party website to possibly grab your public keys or your xpubs. I think that was described in the issue. And so, yeah, I agree with Shinobi in the sense that I feel like even if what he considers to be minor vulnerabilities are treated this way and just very dismissive and not really being willing to explore the possibilities or put any effort into researching how it could have possibly been worse than he expected. I feel like if anything more serious does come along, I don't trust him, or I mean, I don't know anyone else at Ledger, but I don't really trust them at this point to effectively communicate to users when they could possibly be in danger. So I don't think I would go around saying don't buy the Ledger, because I still think there are some advantages in terms of the way they handle with the screen and the other functionality they have on the device. There are some advantages in that way that they have over the Trezor, but then the Trezor has some advantages over the Ledger in terms of their hardware being much more open than the Ledger, which is why I would probably be recommending, if I recommended any, it would probably be Trezor over Ledger. But yeah, I don't like this behavior. Like, just the behavior in general puts me off, and I don't appreciate that. And I feel like he should, like Ledger, I don't know how much power he has in the company, but Ledger should not be allowing him to basically act as a very poor customer support person on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, you really do have to kind of keep up with the developments of these, hardware wallets and wallets in general. And so I was just looking at this and thinking, like, a lot of this is just about how you store your bitcoins, right? Like, I mean, I wouldn't have everything all in one place. Like, it's a good idea to split this stuff up and always keep up to date with these development teams and make sure that they're staying with these updates and understanding the way that the current Bitcoin network is operating. And so, yeah, it's important that those people that are front forward facing on Twitter and everything are, at least keeping people, especially with hardware wallets, keeping them kind of calm about the situation and just letting them know that it's being worked on. But yeah, I've still got this, Ledger Nano S, and I'm still planning on using it a little bit. But I mean, I'm definitely going to be precautious about it. Make sure it's updated. Make sure I'm, doing everything the right way.
Yeah, to get into the actual exploit though, it's pretty much an issue with how they have their API set up and calling the device. And there's a get wallet public key request in terms of the device interfacing with the actual computer it's connected to. And as of right now, that is a completely unauthenticated call. So as long as your device is plugged into a computer and unlocked through the PIN code, pretty much anything can make that call to the device and gain access to any of your public keys. So this is pretty much potentially a complete privacy loss. And when responding to people kind of critiquing Ledger for this, BTC Chip pretty much just ignored any kind of issue here. Like there's no possible way this could have been exploited or users were at risk. And when Max Hillenberg from WCN actually recommended users move over to a new seed and stop using the previous one, personally, I would say just if you use your device very frequently, like if you just leave it sitting, in the shelf or whatever, and don't access it often at all, I would say it's probably not a need to do that. But like this is a really serious issue. I mean, it's not just a website. Like any malware on your computer could be, accessing this in the same way. It's a completely unauthenticated call. And as well, like there are a million risks besides just a malicious website. I mean, like for instance, a few months ago, we covered a cryptojacking malware that actually infected routers and was pretty much injecting the cryptojacking website into web page requests at the router level. So pretty much anything that can slip that request into any network connection you have would be able to actually make this call to the ledger and compromise it, as well as anything locally on your machine. And like things like Windows, which are not the most secure operating system out there, are very widely used. Like, that's one of the main issues in this space, I think, is so many people use Windows, but so little developer effort is put into it. Like, the fact that he's not acknowledging that this very well could have been widely exploited, especially with the prevalence of chain analysis companies in this space and the fact that they make money directly off of de anonymizing users, is ridiculous. And like I will actively recommend people do not buy this product because they are not like forthright with the actual downsides of exploits, and they are not actually like telling their users how to mitigate the consequences of things. Like every time something is found, they pretend like there's no issue. They don't give users any real advice about what could have happened, how to undo the damage if possible to something that could have happened. Like it's just absurd.
Yeah, like I was saying, man, you just have to keep up with the development teams and keep up with what's going on. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of websites out there that are malicious, and it's always just you're in cryptocurrency. You need to be avoiding malware and anything that really compromises your system. So always stay up with the developments, and that's why it's important that we cover malware as it's coming out and these big ransomware attacks. I mean, you can't just yeah I mean, like you could do crazy glacier cold storage and then just put it away. But if you're going to use these new technologies, it's important you stay up to date with everything that's going on in the space.
All right. So next up, more Bcash news, which I'm irritatedly guessing that's why so many people are watching right now. But
It's all the hype, man.
mhm. So Deadalnix, or Amory Sachet, the lead developer of Bitcoin ABC, has at this point publicly stated that the proof of work change option is not off the table, and is actually advising developers to prepare a patch in case that this is actually necessary. In his words, it would be better to have a patch and not need it than to need a patch and not have it. And so, given the dynamics of the situation, like Bitcoin, Satoshi's vision has around 75% of the hash rate, last I checked, and actually for a brief while this morning had actually surpassed the price of BCH ABC on the Poloniex futures market. Although, again, last I checked, ABC was back on top in terms of price. I mean, this is not, this isn't like I would say in the BIP 148 situation, a highly unlikely event. Like, I think there is a very real possibility that this has to happen. Like unless miners are pretty much just switching over to end chain affiliated pools just to troll people and try to create a false impression of large support for it, then this is a very serious potential. Like, Craig is obviously not a rational person. And again, caveat, if this hash rate is genuinely supporting his client, like, they very well could wind up attacking the ABC chain. And really, there is no alternative if they are willing to burn money and operate at a loss to really continue preventing that chain from operating, because it doesn't really matter. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter that much that a lot of the exchanges are supporting it if the chain is effectively unusable, and those exchanges really only have access to money that was safely deposited before the fork. Like, there's no ability for new liquidity to come in and help find that price. Like, it kind of hamstrings the pricing mechanism. And really, at that point, like, you have to change the proof of work. Like, if your network can't function, your markets are being inhibited by an attack like this, like, it does not make it a clear cut thing if the attackers are irrational enough to just continue burning money to assure that your chain can't operate. And to really go a step further, like last week, a new mining pool, Shark Pool, which is operated by Cash Pay Solutions. It's a parent company of a few Bcash projects, a wallet. They brought back Mike Hearn's Lighthouse project and an e-commerce platform, have set this pool up specifically to perform 51% attacks. And I mean, they're not just going to stop at Bitcoin ABC either. I mean, obviously, that's very likely going to be the first target of their attacks if this is not something that's just going to fold and disappear under a bunch of hot air. But they're going to be trying to attack other altcoins as well. Like, pretty much any altcoin that they can muster hash power for, they're going to mine empty blocks for and just dump the rewards on that coin to buy more Bcash on the Satoshi's vision side. And pretty much the rationale from the head of this company is like anything except Bcash is an attack on Bitcoin and won't be allowed to exist. Like, it's really, in my opinion, sounds like a deranged lunatic, just like Craig Wright. Like, if you're not doing what I want you to do, then fuck you, you're completely illegitimate. And they're planning on just rotating their hash power around and attempting to attack and prevent the functioning of any altcoin that they can, which is just, I mean, honestly, like as far as like very small market cap shit coins, yes, this could be sustained for a long time. As far as Bcash, like, this could potentially go on for a while. But I mean, outside of insignificantly valued shit coins, like, I don't really see the potential that this could be sustained forever. Like, Craig is talking 2 years of no trading. Like, that's absurd. Like, you are literally talking like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars with no profit just being burned. And I mean, it's absurd. You can't keep that up. And if Calvin Iyer really is stupid enough to just blindly bankroll Craig whatever he wants to do, then it's gonna wind up costing him a fortune. Like this is not a rational or sustainable course of action.
Yeah, it's definitely something where I'm just looking at it thinking about, all these guys were just toasting drinks and stuff like a year ago about how Bitcoin Cash is going to be the real Bitcoin, and now we just see them going back and forth about, oh, BSV is Bitcoin, or BSV is the real BCH, or however they're labeling it. It just, I mean, I hope that this whole thing goes through and we're going to see some craziness going on that chain, and some reorgs, and just like really to kind of see how all that stuff will play out. Because I think you might be right that it might have to happen, because it seems like some of these, game theory, the way it's going to play out is eventually it has to play out, right? Like in order for us to learn something about how a proof of work change would take place with real economic nodes behind that activity, and it takes a situation like this, and it would be a lot of that blockchain particle collision going on, where we could look at it and say, like, this is what's going on, this is what happened, and this is how we can use that to go forward in the future, and say that you can use that to basically move forward and say that this has happened in the past and it could happen again in the future. And yeah, I mean, that CoinGeek billionaire, Calvin Iyer, I mean, he seems like he's pretty caught up behind Craig Wright, and Craig Wright seems really fueled up. But like I was saying, a year ago, they were all toasting. It just makes me wonder, like, if there's some, like they're doing this just to get everybody, to get us more viewers, right? I mean, it's like people get jazzed when there's some kind of conflict going on. And Bitcoin Cash was just sitting there without much going on, and now all of a sudden a lot of people are interested to figure out what exactly is going on. So this is a little bit of that conflict brings eyes and interest, and maybe they're just using that for marketing, and everything will realign at some point, and we'll just see them come together. But I mean, the way that the speech has been going on Twitter, it really does feel like they're going to go through with this. We're going to see reorgs. We might see a proof of work change. I mean, it might be an all-out war. It's going to be, I mean, they're calling it a hash war. I mean, it seems like we're seeing battle lines drawn whenever you say there's mining pools specifically for 51% attacks. I mean, yeah, it's going to get interesting. I mean, like, we're going to have to check out tomorrow with fine-tooth comb.
I mean, it's like Craig is like been progressively alienating more and more of the Bcash community over the last year. I mean, yeah, there's always the potential this is just some show to try and stop the just like I mean the price has just been dropping like a rock for a year, minus like a few pathetic attempts at pumping. But this just seems way too elaborate and way too like the downside risk is you just completely fragment the entire Bcash community and then have no unity going forward. And at that point, like, was that really worth just a ridiculous marketing attempt to get more attention?
Yeah, I mean, what little Bitcoin Cash community there is, I mean, they really have become polarized through this. I mean, I didn't even know there was that many people behind Bitcoin Cash until this whole thing strolled up, and that's where it's like, yeah, even if they decide to realign and move forward together, I mean, it's definitely going to leave the communities fractured. I think you're right, man. I mean, this might have to happen.
Mm-hmm. It's tomorrow.
Yeah, it's only a day away.
Mm-hmm. All right, Janine. So I believe you have an update for one of our other favorite scammers.
Man,
Yeah.
there's so
So
many
you
now.
guys, yeah, you guys may remember we covered what was going on with a guy named Morgan Raccoons who goes by Nodefather and Metabolo on Twitter. In episode 82, I think it was 82, that was when we just talked about his case in general when he was arrested on charges of money laundering and operating a money services business without a license. I think that was earlier this year, like March or February, something like that, spring or late winter. And then we also had another episode, 114, which was with Chris Rice Crypto, who was someone who used to work briefly on the Bitcointopia project, which was basically trying to sell land out in the middle of nowhere in Nevada to cryptocurrency enthusiasts in order to build some kind of Bitcoin utopia village or something. And I mean, it was pretty hilarious because after that was announced, we saw within the first several months that he only got as far as basically building a tent on a plot of land that we're not even quite sure was in the area, but presumably it was. He had bought, I think it was like 4.5 acres, but he hadn't really built anything. He wasn't having any construction crews come out. Basically, there was just a tent that he was using while he was there, and he dug some like trenches around the tent. Very impressive. Um, so in a just a couple of months, he didn't get very far, but he was claiming that he had bought tens or hundreds of acres of land that was going to be used for Bitcointopia, and he was already selling off acres of land to people. The problem was, as we talked about in that episode 114, that he didn't actually have the land rights to that property. He hadn't actually bought more than, I think it was somewhere between like 4.3 or 4.5 acres. Um, so that was a problem because I mean, if you go to the threads today on the Block Digest Twitter, I've added updates to prior threads where we talked about him having a history of scamming people through other loan schemes and stuff like that. Even for his legal case earlier this year, he was asking people to loan him money that he would then pay back later, which I don't think that's happened either, obviously. But a lot of his, scams go back at least 2 years before this. That was when I first became aware of it, was about 2 years ago. Unfortunately, a lot of people were not aware of that history and unknowingly or otherwise were promoting at least his legal case, which then kind of compounded the issue with Bitcointopia, and people were seeing that and thinking, oh, well, this guy is like, fighting the government, so should buy land from him too. He must be trustworthy because all of these Bitcoin people are supporting him. But no, that was not the case at all. So the recent development, well, it's recent in terms of the documents being published, but apparently he was arrested at the end of October again by after a search warrant was issued by the Department of Homeland Security, specifically an agent who may be a fake name or not, but calls himself Nick Jones. And he basically filed an affidavit to support the issuance of a search warrant for various devices that Morgan owns, mostly a phone, a tablet, and also a backpack in addition to devices. And basically they are not, it's a big document and it's linked in the description. I didn't see what the specific charges are, but I believe they did mention like various parole violations because he is still on parole from the previous charges that I don't think that's been settled. And now there's a new charge of operating a land fraud scheme. So the fact that he's been doing the Bitcointopia stuff while he was being investigated for money laundering things with local Bitcoins, well, that is not good for his that is not good for his case at all. Probably not going to go over well. And the interesting thing to me was actually this agent, he basically details his entire history of investigating him. which goes all the way back to September 2015 when he made an initial search of San Diego-based Bitcoin exchangers, or people who were willing to do Bitcoin to fiat trades, or maybe crypto to crypto trades. And he found that Metabolo, aka Morgan Raccoons, was one of the biggest sellers. So he has been basically following his public profiles for at least 3 years now. Which, by the way, if you don't know about like law enforcement practices, if it's something that a public person, an ordinary citizen can do, like if I can just go and look at your Twitter profile, that's not technically considered like an investigation. It's like you don't have to apply for a search warrant to look at someone's Twitter profile. Like that's not considered investigation activity that you would have to get permission for. But basically, he's basically just been looking at Morgan's public pages for the past 3 years and connecting the dots between his, various identities that he's been using on Facebook and Twitter and local Bitcoins. And he, I mean, it doesn't really take that much investigation because the Bitcointopia stuff was very public, and we were covering it several months ago. I believe the episode with Rice Crypto was back in June or July. So it's been a couple of months since we were very public about the fact that we knew about this. So no doubt they were going to eventually find out about it. And it was pretty clear that he did not own the land that he was claiming to own. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me, and this is not going to go well for him. And people are saying that like we should support him to, I don't know, prevent this from being fallout for Bitcoin. But to be honest, I don't see how supporting a guy who is trying to scam people out of money is a good idea for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think we should say that we're past that time of just blind support. I mean, like, Bitcoiners, they're all shapes and sizes. And, there was just definitely a past there where anybody getting involved in that should have done a little investigation into that before they just jumped wholeheartedly into it. And, I mean, somebody with a past like that, it's going to come back to haunt them. And, this CEO or whoever he wants to label himself will be facing these problems, and they might end up in jail again, or they're going to end up in some sort of hang up to where your investment could be in trouble. And I mean, this is something that we covered a while back. We had Rice Crypto on to talk about it, like you're saying, and he's also been putting out information on a regular basis. I've seen him updating everybody on Twitter that this is still going on. And so I mean, like we're starting to see all this enforcement come into place, right? Like the SEC just made a move against Ether Delta. We've seen some recent ICOs get served papers from Colorado and Texas, as far as like people just making sales to their citizens. And I mean, that could come back to haunt them too. I mean, like these things. Like we were saying in that Ether Delta story, the SEC keeps their eyes on things for years. And I mean, this has been a very public facing problem. And I mean, it just takes a little bit of real investigation into that to see that problem. But I guess a lot of people were just sort of blind supporting. I mean, we are, definitely past the days of where, like Bitcoin popped up in mainstream media. Woo, like let's keep it there. And I mean, like it's going to be there from now on. And I mean, like, should really look about who we're supporting and what their goals are and everything. And I mean, a lot of that had to do with just, I think, libertarian support of people that wanted to create another one of these. Just like, the thing is, people have this concept of like, they can't fix things. They have to rebuild everything. Like, because this isn't the only project like this. There's a new project coming out now where, they're trying to build a city in the desert and try to do everything right from the ground up. And I guess that's just an appealing idea. It's something that people out west really get excited about, because I guess it brings back those days of the Western Front, and you can just build up a homestead and start from scratch. But this is all about fixing the system and solving problems. And that's where the hard work comes in, is really trying to get people to actually look at this technology in a way that's actually going to solve problems and not just fill your pockets. And so yeah, it's important to investigate all these things.
I mean, this is called justice. Like, say what you want about the government. I really don't care. Like, Morgan was objectively scamming people out of money by defrauding them. And, well, here are the consequences. Alrighty, though, Janine. Got another thing to bring up?
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting that we mentioned the interview that Tone Vase did with Craig Wright on the last show, and I was making points about how I didn't think he was the right person to do that interview and that it wasn't really worth people's time. Coincidentally, he on the day of that show, I believe, he made a tweet saying that he was a fan of BitMEX, and he shilled his affiliate link for 10% savings, whatever that means. I don't even know how this works. But basically, he's a lot of these people who are like crypto celebrities or pretend they're crypto celebrities do this affiliate marketing stuff. And it's really annoying to people like me who think it's like only a few hops away from being a complete scam. So he made this tweet November 11th about being a fan of BitMEX, and here's my affiliate link. And then I believe it was the next day he made another tweet saying that he had been banned from BitMEX on suspicion of being a U.S. citizen, which I believe he is, even though he was making all of these claims about how he hasn't been in the U.S. for more than 30 days in the last year. That still makes you a U.S. citizen, and I'm not particularly familiar with BitMEX's policy, but I assume that because they just banned him outright, that they probably have a policy of being very strict with any U.S. citizens. Like, they have to get verified and provide a bunch of documentation. Shinobi, do you know what BitMEX's policy is regarding U.S. citizens?
Yep, we're not allowed there. Period. End of story.
Okay.
And citizens of Quebec in Canada.
Okay, well, that makes it very clear. Okay, so if you are a U.S. citizen and you are trading on BitMEX, first of all, you're not allowed there. Two, if you know that you're not allowed there, you should not be publicly tweeting to your Twitter account with 100,000 plus followers that you not only use the exchange, but you are making income from it through affiliate marketing. That's a bad idea. So no surprise, next day Tone announces, "Oh, I've been banned from Bitfinex on suspicion of being a U.S. citizen," which he is. And the other interesting thing that he said in the tweet is that half of his income comes from this affiliate marketing stuff, which I have so many thoughts on, but I don't know if we want to get into that. What I did find funny is that John Carvalho made a response tweet to that announcement saying, "Hey, friendly advice. Maybe you should," because another thing that Tone did was he was saying, "Well, now that half of my income is gone, I have to increase my consultancy rates." And John was like, "That's not really how this works. Like, you don't make a really poor mistake like this and then say, 'Oh, I'm just going to make you all pay double.'" And then Tone made some comment about like, "Well, if I'm making less, then I'll do less. Again, equilibrium." I don't know exactly what he means by that. If his assumption is that if he puts less work into it, then it's somehow more valuable, or I have no idea what his rationale is. But basically, his idea that this incident should mean that he should get paid more because he mostly relies on affiliate marketing. No.
I don't know much about these affiliates. I mean, it's something that I've heard a lot about, but I mean, I don't know how. I don't know anything about that side of the stuff, but I mean, it is really sloppy. What was that you were going to say?
Well, I was just gonna, for anyone who doesn't know what affiliate marketing is, at a very basic level, it just means like you create an account on some kind of business or you're a customer of a business, and then that business tells you, well, if you share this link to our this very specific link that is a combination of like our website plus a, they usually put some kind of extra hash or code at the end that's specific to you so that they know that you were the person that shared the link. They say, if you share this link with people and people click it and they sign up and they start doing like X amount of dollars in trading, or they do X amount of trades, then you get a certain cut of either, I don't know, the profits that the exchange makes from those trades or something like that. Some kind of reward for you marketing the exchange to people. So that's basically what half of his income comes from, is basically sharing links. People click on them and they sign up to BitMEX.
Marketing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty much, they get a cut of the exchanges take, whether the person trading is losing money or gaining money. So it's like pretty much once people click a link, no matter how they're doing personally, like you're making passive income off of it. But like, I kind of feel bad for Tone, but at the same time, it's like, dude, like, come on, you should have seen this coming. I mean, like, dude, like, you don't just publicly advertise you're trading on an exchange you're not allowed to trade on. And also, like, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm pretty sure that you can actually form a small corporation, which is like almost nothing really in the grand scheme of things to incorporate, and then can legally trade on BitMEX or like other exchanges that US citizens are barred from under that corporation. And so it's kind of like, dude, like I kind of feel bad for him, but it's like, come on, man. Like the way to do this above board was right there, and you chose not to do it. Like there was an option to prevent this from being a possible thing, and you did not cover your bases. Like you should have done that, man.
Yeah, I mean, look, if this was like, I don't know, a person from Africa or the Middle East, or someone who lived in an area that, had a lot of economic issues, and their only way to, one of their few incomes was, trading, and maybe that country is blocked from trading on this exchange or something, and they were very careful about making sure that they didn't, they weren't public about the fact that they were a person living in this country or a citizen of this country trading on this exchange, and then they just got found out by accident. I would have sympathy for that person, because geo blocks suck. But I do not feel sorry for a former Wall Street banker who clearly has enough money that he could have done what you just described, incorporating a company, or simply used another exchange that allows for US citizens or something. I don't feel sorry for a guy who is not only that kind of person, but also just basically publicly doxed his account on his very followed Twitter account for no other reason than to continue to do affiliate marketing. Like, I don't have sympathy for that. I just can't. I don't feel it.
I kind of feel bad for the embarrassment of the whole thing, because I mean, it is like we're saying. I mean, you're forward-facing public figure that talks about crypto investments and trading on a regular basis, and I mean, if you're doing that, then you think you should be able to understand the nuances of regulation, especially because Tone's always talking about regulations, and he's a kind of a libertarian spirit, and so he's keeping up with all these things, and you think he would understand that BitMEX does have a very clear policy, and some of these, these policies have been around for a long time now. And I don't know if he just got lulled into a sense of security because, he's around these traders that are incorporated and doing the wise thing. And, down in Mexico, or, some people, they move and, they renounce their citizenship and get citizenship to other places to do these kind of trades. I mean, it's just, it is just kind of sloppy, and it's a little embarrassing. Kind of feel bad for that. But I mean, like, yeah, the whole John Carvalho back and forth about raising his rates for this, it just really is like, wait a minute. You just publicly made a mistake in like what you're advising people in, and you want to raise your rates. Like, if anything, this is just showing like why, everybody who considers themselves an expert should be looking at all these things all the time, and you can't really let your guard down. And I mean, also just the risk of thinking someone is an expert, and like, people that might have followed along with him in these past couple of weeks who said, oh, you know, Tone's trading on BitMEX and he's a U.S. citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'll start trading on BitMEX without looking into that real policy and understanding the nuances of all this. Well, they just did something illegal too. And so that's where, you know, yeah, it's sloppy and it's embarrassing.
Yeah, and the reason I made this a story, I mean, not to say that it's illegal in the same way that Morgan Raccoon's scheme was illegal, but it was kind of in the general theme of people getting caught doing schemes that may have ethical issues with them. And I do think there are, like, in terms of affiliate marketing, when you click on these links, obviously that by clicking on the link, obviously they're keeping track of a certain pattern of behavior about what you're doing and how you sign up to the service and how you're buying a product in order to pay someone else. So it's another one of these things where it's like marketing, advertising that has this underlying surveillance structure and aspect to it, which I don't like. And also because there are a lot of people with, like, I mean, probably a lot of them have bought their followers, but there are a lot of accounts on Twitter, in crypto Twitter specifically, that have a lot of followers, and they seem to get a lot of these. They have a lot of these passive income schemes coming up all the time in their tweets, like, "Please sign up for this exchange. Use my affiliate link." The famous one is obviously Richard Hart, who claims to be a billionaire, but somehow still needs passive income from affiliate marketing. Amazing. And so I wanted to make this a story just to show that this is one of those schemes that can really bite you in the ass, because if you're doing this affiliate marketing stuff, like, this is how easily they can take it away from you. Like, you call it passive income because not only are you not really doing, it's passive, you're not doing actively anything to earn that money. It's just it's your reputation and how many followers you get and how many people click on a link. And that can be taken away from you very easily because you don't really have a relationship with any of these businesses. Like, they do this affiliate marketing thing because obviously they're earning money off of people clicking the links. But at any time they can just cut you off. Like, they don't care. Like, it's not a thing that I would count on for half of my income.
Yeah, I mean, the affiliate link thing is something where I've seen it where people are very close to the company and they just have one affiliate link. And I suppose it's kind of like the company's way of, you know, throwing somebody a bone because they enjoy the product or something like that. And I can understand that situation a little bit because, you know, it's hard to find a job nowadays and maybe it's a product you believe in and you want to help people. But yeah, certainly be wary of these people that just have a lot of affiliate links and are tweeting things about how to make, you know, how they're, you know, want you to go to this place or look at this coin and all that, because it's definitely some situation where, you know, they're not exactly just all right and doing well to where you can think they're gonna get your money in the right investment. So yeah, be wary of the whole thing. Just be aware. And yeah, I mean, if you see somebody with a bunch of affiliate links, that might be a red flag. But guess let's go ahead and turn the corner here a little bit and start talking about different countries and the way that they're handling crypto. And you know, we're talking about all this nuance and regulation. So let's get into what's going on in some other countries and how they're starting to adapt here with this. So this week, the U.S. sanctions to remove Iran from the SWIFT network, which is you know, just an acronym, Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It kicked in this week, and now it looks like they're getting closer to finalizing their plans for a national cryptocurrency. And back in May, the U.S. imposed these sanctions, and for the first time in history, really, Iran's central bank has been officially cut off of the network that allows them to send and receive transactions to and from its allies. So, yeah, this has been the case for a long time now, where if the U.S. isn't happy with the current political relations with the country, they could use their power as the central issuer and controller of the value transfer system we use for global economic markets as settlement to bend their will. And, you know, this has become just a problem where people like myself get real passionate about the idea of Bitcoin being able to help people. So Kingston University professor Steve Keen criticized this move, saying that, quote, the U.S. has gone rogue and cannot be allowed to dictate economic or political policy to the rest of the world. The sooner the rest of the world develops an alternate payment system, possibly working through SWIFT, but using a basket of currencies as the basis for a supranational unit of exchange, the better. And as like I'm saying, as an American, I can kind of agree with this position. I mean, like not necessarily through the SWIFT network, but like a basket of different currencies and regional currencies to help people route around these issues that they're facing as far as political pressure through central banks. And it's these systems that have allowed us to perpetuate war across the globe, and it's incentivized to keep doing so, to keep that power structure in place. I mean, of all the weapons we have to hurt people, this economic weapon we have causes too much damage in the world, and it's not sustainable, and it's a damage to where the people committing it don't even really understand that they're doing so. Yeah. However, in today's world of cryptocurrencies, we are for the first time seeing these situations circumvented. 6 months ago, when the sanctions were put into place, Russia and Iran came to an agreement to use cryptocurrencies for economic settlement. And back in August, we saw some details on this crypto. According to the ISC, a central bank affiliated body with Iran, it will be backed by all right, I'm going to mispronounce this. Is it the Rial or the Rial? That's the Iran currency, and is developed on the Hyperledger fabric. So the ISC also clarified its intention to use the digital Rial as the interbank payment instrument, and that's in phase 1, and local payment medium in phase 2. So it's been working this phase 1 for the past 6 months, and it looks like this phase 2 is currently being worked. This CCN article in the description points out a major hotel booking platform in Iran. Hotels in Iran, that's what it's called, have started to accept crypto as a payment method. And Leon Hardwies, the co-founder and president of the Hong Kong Bitcoin Association, reported, quote, "Many people still look at cryptocurrencies and say, I won't use this. But already in 2018, people are getting into the situation where they have to use cryptocurrencies as their only payment option, or else they can't conclude their trade. This is how Bitcoin will eventually be adopted." And that's pretty accurate. I mean, we are seeing this in Venezuela, where the local Bitcoin volume has been soaring to new all-time highs recently, and it looks like this might be a similar situation in Iran. And here in this next story I'm going to get into is it looks like this other country is going to be working like this. So, but real quick, just a comment: did you guys have anything to say about Iran being kicked out of the SWIFT network?
Yeah, I mean, this is like, why on earth would you think this is a viable move anymore in a world with Bitcoin? Like, all you're doing by cutting them out of traditional wire transfer systems is just leaving them no alternative except cryptocurrencies, and they're going to embrace it. Like, coming from the attitude assuming that the people running these things do not want Bitcoin to catch on, you're doing the exact opposite thing you should be doing. You're taking the kinds of actions that are going to guarantee it catches on. Like, if people are cut off from something that's useful, they're going to look for a substitute good. And right now, the best substitute good out there is Bitcoin. Like, they cannot be locked out of it. Like, they're going to start using it. It's inevitable.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, man. I mean, it's like we're putting people in a corner, and they're going to have to decide. And a lot of people are seeing this new technology as a way to route around this problem that's been around for a long time. And it's kind of pushing their hand, and it's not very smart if you consider these people your foe. But let me just jump into this next one because it's related. So yeah, very similar to this story in Iran, but different motives. Maybe a greater example to give as to why this is in people's best interests, even in U.S. territories. The Marshall Islands president, Hilda Heen, back in April, announced a plan to launch a national cryptocurrency in its best interest to avoid, funding projects and being stuck under rising sea levels. The Marshall Islands is one of these islands that's under threat of rising sea levels, and they're pretty worried about climate change over there. And they're U.S. territory, and the petrodollar is, like we're saying, I mean, it's an incentive program that's just going to keep moving forward. And if they can find some way to fund climate change research around the petrodollar, because I mean, I guess they, people using the petrodollar to fund this research is not a very smart move. So, yeah, since this announcement back in April, the IMF has said, quote, this would increase macroeconomic and financial integrity risk and elevate the risk of losing the last U.S. dollar correspondent banking relationship. And that's end quote. And her political opponents accused Jihan of damaging the nation's reputation with this idea of a national cryptocurrency and used the situation to hold a vote to strip her of her position as the island nation's president. That ended in a 16-16 deadlock vote of no confidence, and it appears that this plan will continue, or at least her presidency, with this plan. And so that plan is to issue a cryptocurrency called the Sovereign, and it will be used for public infrastructure and to help fund the reverse the effects of climate change. And it's hard to say what the best plan is for these regional cryptocurrencies, but it will be effective at helping solve problems around these third-party interests, including keeping the current energy structure in place to prop up a value system. There are so many untold consequences of that, and that's why we are seeing friend and foe of the U.S. working to solve their problem with this new technology. And that's where I think these two stories are a pretty interesting dichotomy of two countries using a regional cryptocurrency to help solve a problem. I mean, whether or not they're going to be successful, I mean, that's something we're going to follow along and keep up to date. But like Shinobi's saying, I mean, their hand is kind of forced through the situation. And it's where, it might not be the smartest move, but just like, like that Bcash fork might have to happen. I mean, like, I think these things kind of have to happen. I mean, it takes a lot for the market to learn. And sometimes, yeah, that requires like actually going through with this proposed plans all the way through. I mean, like, this is the first time Iran's really actually been cut off of the SWIFT system. And, that's after 6 months of setting up this cryptocurrency settlement with Russia. And I mean, as far as, they're moving in the direction to solve these problems. I mean, this weapon that we've had for a long time to shut people down and inflate their currency through central banks is something that's not going to be a thing in the future. And we're starting to see an end to that reign. And it's going to definitely be, a little dicey. And I mean, we're going to have to see how it goes. But it looks like that's the way things are standing right now with these cryptos in Iran and the Marshall Islands. Did y'all have any comment about this Marshall Islands crypto?
Yeah, I mean, it's, like we've covered them like quite a few times since they really started floating this idea and really started running into outside financial connections being cut off. But I mean, ultimately, like, I really wish that they would not move with a private currency like this, especially the president talking about like tagging people's identities into the system to be able to verify things. I mean, like, yeah, even with all of those things, this could offer a benefit compared to the ridiculously harsh like situation they're in financially with connections to the outside world and just complications and friction to even domestic use of financial services. But I really wish they would look into directly adopting Bitcoin. Like, it would be so much better in terms of just the sustainability of the system and like tightly wound linkages to the outside world.
Yeah, that's a lot of trust to give up that they think, they have to have. I mean, they got to have that. It's the way they feel. And I mean, I think that's the way they feel. It's just it's a big step. And I mean, some countries I think will take that move, and it'll be interesting competition in the future. And yeah, I mean, it's just happening. It's incredible. I mean, like we discussed years ago, talking about how Bitcoin's going to be in the center of geopolitics one day. And I mean, it's here, man. I mean, like, this situation right now with the SWIFT network in Iran, and they're imposing hard sanctions from Trump administration, and they're trying to get that thing through. And I mean, it's incredible that we're at this point. And I mean, we're seeing it in all these different countries with the Koreas and Venezuela. yeah, so it's an interesting time, and we're just gonna have to keep up to date with it and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out for any cryptocurrency Bitcoin businesses who are thinking, "Hey, this is an opportunity to like make some inroads to Iran to use Bitcoin." Do not post that in your company's Slack channel, okay? Don't do that.
Yeah, that might get you in trouble. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff there going on with that directive from Trump with the petro, and it's like, how are these things gonna? It's gonna be interesting to see the governance pop out of this stuff.
Mhm. Alrighty, so sliding along to the next up to bat. Michigan has become the next in a long line of states to ban political contributions in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And like there's really not much to say on this except kind of the line of reasoning going on, but it's the same stupid shit. Like the Michigan Campaign Finance Act specifically says contributions are a donation of money or anything of ascertainable monetary value. Emphasizing the value of any donation must be exact, precise, and certain, or can be determined with certainty. And so the rationale here well, pretty much just back this up real quick. There's somebody, Mr. William Baker, who was running for a state legislature on the 6th and ended up losing. And he actually wrote a letter to the finance board, kind of asking for clarification and stating that it was self evident that it was allowed to take donations in cryptocurrencies. And the board responded that it was not. And pretty much their line of reasoning was that the value fluctuates like stocks and commodities. So, air quote, there is no way to ascertain the precise monetary value of one Bitcoin on any particular day. And this is really kind of absurd because, like, again, this is you take a Bitcoin, you sell it, and the price you sell it at is the monetary value of that donation. Like, it's really that simple. And a lawyer who's actually commenting on this, Mr. Stephen Middlebrook, is actually pointing out that campaigns are explicitly allowed to accept non monetary or in kind contributions, which are valued at the fair market value of the goods when received. And so, like this rationale is just it's absurd, and I think it's really just people who are technically illiterate looking at headlines like drug dealers and terrorist funding going, oh well, these people could be donating to politicians now. But it's like you're required to give your name and identify yourself when making a political contribution. The pricing issue is not an issue. You simply record the value when received, or as would be more logical in this case, when sold. And there's no issues here. Like there's no way for a drug dealer to dump millions of dollars into a political campaign without being identified, because he has to identify himself to make that donation. And the Federal Election Commission 4 years ago decided that it would be legal for PACs to accept small donations in cryptocurrency. So on a federal level, it has been specifically approved that this is acceptable. And it's really like it's just really kind of silly the way that these states one after another are starting to just like refuse to allow donations in cryptocurrencies, given that all of the points they keep bringing up when setting these rulings are just completely baseless. Like they're all something that can be dealt with or is dealt with already. And it really just reeks of just complete Ludditism and an inability to really understand any of this.
Yeah, I mean, like the new Colorado governor we got here just elected. He started accepting donations back in 2014. I want to say, that's one of those things I always hear people talk about as far as first guys starting to accept crypto and crypto government and people in government that are favorable to crypto. And I mean, nowadays we're starting to see like these different legislations come out of different states and different announcements coming out of different states. And it sounds like just market signaling. And it's kind of upsetting when you hear about Michigan because, people that don't know, Detroit is in a terrible situation. And in Flint, Michigan, like these two cities were major industrial players back in, the 1950s, 1960s, the development of, the American automobile, and they have a lot of factories there, something that probably should be used and repurposed for something like mining operations or, sort of like startup companies. These are the real like donators that would donate to a politician nowadays. And that idea of it just being like a drug dealer donating, I mean, like, yeah, it's just like kind of a knee jerk reaction of like, oh, crypto bad, stay away. We don't want. And I mean, it's a bad market signal for a place like Michigan where there is a lot of economic problems there. And it's something where they have public infrastructure that is not being used that they should be repurposing. But, some of these states are in such a bad position. It's hard to say that they're actually going to be able to get themselves out. And that's where it's like, we're really starting to see kind of a division of the states based through what people's opinions are on crypto and Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a generational thing. You're going to have to watch these people slowly shuffle out the door and people who actually understand things shuffle in. I mean, it's not just a cryptocurrency issue, it's technology in general. Like most of the people in government are just completely technically illiterate, and this really shows whenever any kind of technological issue comes up in politics. Like it's just something that they can't wrap their head around. And I mean, it's really just a cultural thing. Like most politicians don't really work their way into serious positions without age and that perceived like wisdom, I guess you could say, that comes along with it. When really, with how fast the world is progressing, I mean, that's the polar opposite of the reality. Like, really, the older you are, like, and not to say that people are stupid in general because they're old, but the older you are, like, the less likely you are to actually understand the technological issues in a fast changing world. And that's just a fact.
Yeah, and I mean, like, this is, harping back to these previous two stories is just like, Bitcoin and geopolitics and everything. I mean, it's upsetting that, with age does come wisdom, but I mean, with the politics and being handed this power and being placed in this power structure, you're not incentivized to, take care of the public that elected you. You're not incentivized to help those people, and you're not incentivized to keep up to date with technology. I mean, like the structures in place that got you here, and you're here, and now's the time to partake in this system where it's just grab whatever assets are available and put them somewhere. And yeah, I mean, you'd think in that, I don't know, in this mafia structure, they would just be willing to grab anything that's worth the value. But, that's where it's like maybe some of these people understand this is a real threat to the system. And, they're, hard players with this current power structure and the way that dynamic works. And, they're all in, and maybe they're going to fight it to the end. And that's where it's kind of upsetting for someone like me, where you see these different states and, yeah, the way that they could solve some of their problems with this technology, but it's just being hindered. So it's upsetting.
Is what it is. But to move along, we have another report from Q3 out of GMO in Japan. And they're pretty much sitting on a loss of 640 million yen, or around $5.6 million for its mining operations in the third quarter. And this is pretty much compounded the losses from Q2, which were around 3.2 million. And GMO is kind of pointing obviously at the depreciation of hardware and the overall dropping of prices in the ecosystem. But they've been seeing an increase in revenue. So they're still ramping up the overall amount of hash rate that they're pumping out. And so far, in quarter three, they've mined around 1,500 Bitcoins and only 25 Bcash. So for pretty much the entire quarter, almost all of their hash rate was pointed at Bitcoin. And the net hash rate has jumped to around 674 petahashes from around 479 in September. So over the last month in October, they drastically increased the amount of hash rate that they're operating and are attempting to get to around 800 petahashes within the year. And so while overall the mining operation is sitting on a loss, they're still increasing the size of the hash power that they're using right now, and their exchange business has actually been growing with profits of around 6.5 million for the third quarter, which is up around 34% from quarter two, and a total revenue of around 11.9 million. And so they specifically also said that a lot of the profits from their exchange is actually offsetting losses from the mining operation. So they're coming in at around slightly less than $1 million in net profit between both of the businesses. And the last thing going on is their new 7 nanometer chip, the B3 mining rig, is actually delayed in shipping right now due to shortage of electronic components, which is actually something a decent amount of computer manufacturers have been dealing with somewhat lately. And it kind of sucks. I still want to wait and see really how long this delay winds up being. But this could potentially have some effect on people who've actually purchased this hardware. I mean, obviously, every second counts in terms of getting that hardware delivered and plugged in terms of profitability and hitting your return on investment. So, overall, the company is doing pretty well, even with their mining operations realizing losses over the quarter. But this delay in the B3 shipping could potentially have some kind of reputational damage to them as far as, consumer miners or especially any kinds of large operations that have put in sizable orders, since they started selling them. And so, for now they seem to be doing okay, but this could really kind of set them back a little bit in terms of trying to jump into the market and really give Bitmain a run for its money.
Yeah, you don't like to see those things, but it's something that I guess you could expect in this, industry that is just blossoming outward, right? And I think it's pretty cool to see like how much hash rate they've built up and what their goals are, and like, I think that this transparency on their quarterly reports is pretty good for them, but just to help build a reputation. But you're right. I mean, the delays are something that definitely could hurt the whole idea of like, becoming a real competitor. But I mean, we've seen these happen before. So, I mean, yeah, it's just, I'm just happy to see them, still putting out quarterly reports, even showing that they're, mining at a loss, and, what that means for the market and everything. I mean, that's pretty exciting. But yeah, you don't want to see hardware get delayed and people get upset with that thing because, there's just so many. There's not so many, but there's just these companies just coming into this, and any of these hiccups along the way could be pretty detrimental.
Mm-hmm. And then we've got a little bit of news coming out of China. So apparently, on November 5th, a lot of mining farms in Xinjiang and Guangzhou, hope I'm pronouncing the second one right, had their electricity cut off and were subjected to pretty much tax inspections and real name registration checks, which pretty much require that anybody actually operating mining equipment there or leasing it or anything of the sort has to actually have their real name recorded in a customer registry, accessible and auditable by the Chinese government. And so, as of now, it's really not clear. Last I checked, whether power has been restored to these mining farms. But this is just yet again the next, I guess, news piece in a long string of actions by the Chinese government that have been clamping down harder and harder on mining operations in the country, with their stated goal from last year to eventually like gently push all of these operations out of the country. And for those who remember our last show, this is where the or this is where Bitmain was supposedly deploying 90,000 ant miners um, in preparation for the Bitcoin Cash hard fork. And it's not really clear right now, how this has affected them, whether power has been restored to any of these farms, and really what the end result of this operation is going to be. Like, pretty much like the everything I've seen is that the companies operating these farms are being held to higher standards of enforcement for the real name system, and so that kind of leads me to believe that they've maybe been skirting regulations or cutting corners a little bit there in terms of identity checks for their customers, which might have been part of the reason for the shutdown and the inspection. But it's really the more stories like this pop up, the more unsustainable in the long term it seems to me, looking at it from the outside, that large scale mining operations are going to be able to continue operating in China. Like, there seems to just be more and more regulatory action, more crackdowns, more farms being shut down for not following regulations or laws properly. And like, it really, there's no sign whatsoever that the Chinese government is going to let up in their attempts to slowly push these operations out of country.
Yeah, I mean, moving those 90,000 S9s around seemed like kind of a move of desperation to try and get some real hash rate up for ABC. And that's what I was thinking right when I was reading this. I was like, oh man, this is where they were moving those and the power's out. I wonder how long this inspection is going to last. I mean, this could really hurt what they're planning on in the next next couple of days. So, yeah, it's definitely something where maybe they were trying to just see how they were going to react. Maybe they would allow them to move those. Maybe it was the press release that they were moving those that got them to do this inspection, because, yeah, they are clamping hard. They're clamping down hard on all this enforcement. So it's hard to say what exactly that is or what's going on over there, other than this isn't good timing, man. I mean, like, the whole reason to move those over there was to get them spooled up and running, and that's going to take a little bit of time. So yeah, we'll tomorrow we'll see what goes on.
I mean, depending on whether the power is not been restored yet, this could really have some effect on Bitmain attempting to prepare for the hash rate war. I mean, if that power is still not on, then you're talking a serious deficit in terms of the hash rate that Bitmain has accessible for the fork tomorrow.
Jeez, man.
Yeah. And this is what I mean about Craig Wright being completely, there's nothing supporting his argument that he's going to have a significant effect in terms of bankrupting Bitmain, because anything that's going to bankrupt Bitmain is going to be either things happening in China that are affecting their business, or the fact that they're running their business poorly and they made a very poor choice in terms of trying to migrate to Bitcoin Cash mostly, and not really coming through with their chips like they promised. So yeah, I feel like Craig Wright is still going to try and claim credit for whatever happens to them, but it really doesn't make sense. Like, pretty much every show that we've done, there's something about Bitmain screwing something up in the past like couple months.
Yeah.
But speaking of Bitmain, they have done a little bit of shuffling and rearranging on their board. And supposedly Jihan Wu has now been moved from being a director of the board to a supervisor. And really, the major important factor here is that he's not allowed to vote in board decisions anymore. So he does not really have as much of a direct influence in terms of the actual individual operating decisions of the company at this point. And the article covering this does note that the S15s that recently went on sale have sold out. So that is going to be kind of interesting to see going forward, because purportedly, from rumors I've been hearing, they're pretty much been shut out from lines of credit with any of their chip manufacturers and are going to have to pay upfront for any fab runs at this point. And, as we saw on the last episode, they had an almost 25% yield loss in their 7 nanometer productions, which is it's more than twice, the average bearable loss in a chip run. And also, again, as we recently covered, Antpool has stopped mining SegWit blocks, even though this is really just a loss of revenue for the pool, which is ran by Bitmain. And again, not really a rational business move when you're looking to maximize your profits right before an IPO. Like taking an action that is going to intentionally make you less money just does not seem as really a rational business move. And then, as far as the factors Janine was just talking about in China, like we have the tariffs now in the United States against China that are definitely going to hit, a company like Bitmain in terms of dealing with U.S. customers. So really, I mean, looking at all of this and then the ridiculously foolish decision of going so deep into Bcash and increasing their holdings of it so much, like I really can't see any other reason for Jihan being moved out of a director position except a lot of other people with a stake in the company being very unhappy about some of the decisions that he's made. Like he has, with his influence in a lot of the decisions Bitmain as a whole has been taking, like they have lost a lot of money. And for a company with shareholders that is attempting to go public, I mean, that is absolutely not what any of them are going to want. Like they don't care about ideology or Jihan's stupid opinions about Bitcoin. They want to see the company maximize its profits and get the biggest possible return on their investment. And every action that Jihan has been taking over the last year or so is just in almost complete contradiction with that goal. So really, it makes like he still has like an almost 20% share in the company. He still has a stake in it, but it makes perfect sense to me that other players in the company would push him out of a decision making role given Bitmain's track record over the last year or two.
Yeah, he hasn't been the very best public figure. That's, I mean, like his main quote used over here is the "blank your mother if you want to blank," or "fork your mother if you want to fork." Like that's the main thing. And yeah, I mean, just recently just like all this bad news that's been coming out for Bitmain, and just the information, like you're saying, about going so deep on Bcash, and like we got this fork coming up, and I mean, like there's just been a lot of basically exposed bad decision making going on, and I mean maybe some people on that board are not too happy with him right now, and especially when they're trying to do this IPO, and Bitfury's trying to do it too, trying to do an IPO as well, and it's like if they want to stay competitive, they have to make some sort of move as a corporation, and maybe putting Jihan down to supervisor and keeping him away from board decisions will satisfy the market. But I mean, like it might have already been like the damage is done. Like he's already kind of spoiled the name with the ASIC boost with the overt ASIC boost and amp bleed, covert ASIC boost and amp bleed, and just the way that all played out, and the way that whole argument stirred with the community for so long, and now all this bad decision making. I mean, it's definitely hurt their name, hurt their image. So they have to do something, right? I mean, moving Jihan from a decision maker to a supervisor, it might satisfy people, but I don't know. I don't know. For me, I mean, I think Bitmain's name's pretty well tarnished. It's going to take a bigger move than that for that to happen. Maybe start implementing some more SegWit stuff.
Audio video tweaker in the troll box says Jihan couldn't woo the shareholders anymore.
Way to go, audio.
Yeah, but I mean, I think really the biggest tell we can possibly look for as to why, this reshuffling was done is just keep an eye on Antpool. And if they do resume mining SegWit blocks, then I think that kind of goes to show that shortly after Jihan was removed from that position, that, one of their actions reverses itself in a way that would be specifically catered towards making more profit. And if that happens, then I think we can kind of safely say the reason for him being removed was because of his poor decision making and its effect on the company's profits.
Yeah, it would be cool to see that.
Mm-hmm. But alrighty. Next up. So, sure most of you probably won't remember, but a while back, I am really bad at looking back for previous episode numbers with past stories compared to Janine, so I'll just leave it at a while back. We covered a company, DMG Blockchain Solutions, that was operating in Canada and building a new mining farm in British Columbia. And really, the reason we covered this and kind of the distinguishing factor here was the fact that they are actually building out their own power. Okay, whoever is spamming the channel with fake viewers, fuck off. But
Whoa.
yeah, but the power substation that they're building is really the differentiating factor in terms of their operation, in that they're not dependent on the entire grid that the normal consumers are using for the delivery of their electricity. And so when it comes to the power plant to their operation, like a lot of the big issues with mining farms in different areas of the West lately has been the grid capacity and having to kind of look at prioritizing consumer use over, the mining operation. And most of the places have kind of decided that in the event of choice there, they would cut off the mining farms and divert that electricity to consumer uses. And with its own substation here, like DMG really doesn't have to deal with that because they're not on the consumer grid. Like their limitation is how much power there is to deliver to their operation, and there's not really that choice that has to be made in terms of who gets power when the grid is at capacity. But their farm is now back on operation, or it's operating now, and it was a little late in the actual bringing it online. But this is going to be an interesting thing to see, like how far can they really push this operation, and how much worth can they get out of that substation, and do other operations really start following suit? Because this being one of the biggest delivery or power delivery issues in terms of mining operations and problems they've been having with local jurisdictions, I mean, it really makes sense in the long term to start looking at building out operations like this and kind of removing that problem that they keep having with local jurisdictions they operate in.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember that story, like you're saying, it's a while back, but when we were talking about just basically all these different contracts that they were getting flooded with, and they had to basically slow things down. And so it's good to see it getting operational. And yeah, like you're saying, just put this stuff to the test to where basically policymakers can kind of calm down about, or basically just see like what they need for these contracts to be legitimate. And so they could see like, okay, well, this is how much these miners are taking on this power. Like you're saying, you need this much power. There was a lot of that, like fudging the numbers there with that to where they could get away with it because it's just so unknown. But after this, these DMG miners start up, like this mining firm starts up, and or they have started up. Like now that they get some operation under their belt, and some people looked at some facts and they see like how exactly it's operating. I think they'll be a little bit more, concise in their policy making.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like it really is the only way to deal with the issue. Like, if you don't build out your own substation like this, then you're going to have to deal with the problems in terms of local governments and how they're going to prioritize electricity delivery. Like, it's
So I think I found the episode where you previously discussed it. The topic was Canadian Bitcoin miners building their own power grid, and that was at 24 minutes of Block Digest 119.
I knew you were gonna grab that. Thank you. Yeah, but yeah, yeah. I just wanted to say, like, people that are in this room, don't get discouraged thinking you can't chat because there's a crazy number watching the stream. It's not real.
Yeah, fuck spammers. This fucking shitbag just did this on WCN like a week or two ago too.
Wait, is there really 500 watching?
No.
It's fucking Master Stream Pro.
I'm like, oh
That's
god,
why he
that
was
guy.
asking to contact us so we could fucking buy fake views. Fucking piece of shit.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Oh well, let's just keep rolling with it. Like you're saying, chat, don't worry about the number. It's still just us.
Yeah, I thought it was weird because he
Alright,
came
so-
into the chat and he was like, "Hi, can I contact you?" And I'd never seen him before, so I was like, well, I don't know. We have a mumble.
Mhm. All right, so next up, a little more action going on between Japan and Africa. So Sompo, a big Japanese insurance company, has entered into a partnership with Bitpesa, the remittance company in Africa, and put in 570 million yen to buy out a 10% stake in Bitpesa. So, I mean, this is the second major company now to really get involved from Japan with Bitpesa. We've gone over a lot of details in the past about a lot of the remittance and trade markets between Japan and Africa, specifically in terms of like technology goods and secondhand things like cars or, other reusable products. And I mean, Japan and a lot of the traditional finance companies there really seem to be some in Bitcoin, some other shit coins like Ripple, but just in general seem to really be looking at everything in this space in terms of like removing as much friction as possible in the payment rails between Japan and Africa. Just because like the more friction you can remove, the easier you make, enabling trade between these two areas. And it's never a bad thing, and this is generally something that a lot of developed countries really compete over, is those economic channels between themselves and developing countries, because as economies keep developing and expanding in places like Africa, like the consumers there, the better they do, the more income they have access to, the more employment opportunities they have. You're looking at a burgeoning middle class eventually, and the middle class likes to buy things. So really, anybody who can position themselves as the other end of that business arrangement, they stand to make a lot of money. And it's also just like seeing things like this. Like I like seeing things like this way more than just nonsense like another Western company launches a debit card or a new shit coin is listed on Coinbase, because like things like this are actually doing what Bitcoin set out to do, which is provide financial services to those who don't have access to them. I mean, like that's what this is about at the core of it at the end of the day. And companies who are actually doing that deserve way more credit and way more notoriety than some shitbags like Coinbase, who constantly like to bandy on and virtue signal about how they're helping do these things, when in reality they're literally not doing a damn thing to bring financial services to people like this. In fact, they're actively avoiding it because of the regulatory concerns and not being willing to take a risk to actually do that. They just like to put some feel good headline out and not actually do anything to try to get credit for something they're not doing a damn thing to do.
Yeah, man, I like the story too. Like you're saying, just to see people get involved in some of these areas that are really like important as far as the development of showing, Bitcoin's use case, and also sort of like edging out these economic niches. And remittance is a big one, and is one where we do see people virtue signal about, and it's and that's a important value proposition of Bitcoin. It's one of these things that I wish people would set up more here in this country and then in Mexico to try and get some remittance for these people that are here working their dollars, wages, and then giving it to Western Union or MoneyGram. But that's just, yeah, I guess it's evidence of just like how few there are people really trying to help. So it's good to see like Bitpesa, these guys that are doing something useful get some investment. And like you're saying, just from an insurance perspective, this is one of those industries where we know that insurance is trying to get into Bitcoin and crypto and trying to, lock down the custody and insure these things. So I'm sure that they're going to have some crossover use case for all this too. So just an interesting bit of news for something that's actually going on positive in this space. And it's just I almost feel like I need to incorporate a business to actually get this thing done. It's just like you start to see like how few people are actually helping. Just like, man, you got to do it almost. But yeah, like it's good to see.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, and next up, a bit of news out of Germany, which is actually pretty interesting, and I hope Janine will have a lot to pitch in here. One of the big issues in Germany, at least from my perspective, is a lot of strict requirements and things like local bitcoins being banned. Like they've effectively set up regulations where it's very favorable in some sense, such as not having to pay any kind of capital gains if you've held for a year or more. But on the other hand, like there's a lot of strict KYC AML requirements to the point where something like local bitcoins is not allowed to legally operate. So there really isn't any widespread like on the ground way to trade or buy Bitcoin. But the Bitcoin Group SE, which is the parent company of Bitcoin.de, pretty much the only regulated exchange in Germany, has actually just bought 100% of the shares of Tremel Wertpaper Handelsbank, a small investment bank in Germany. And they're planning on really building out based on this. I mean, first off, they're planning on building out commercial banking services out of this because it's primarily functioned just as an investment bank, so like not something really to go get a checking or a savings account at. And secondly, the licenses that this bank had would actually allow them to start operating cryptocurrencies ATMs in Germany, which is something again like local bitcoins that hasn't really been allowed. Like I believe Janine mentioned a few episodes ago they had just put up an ATM in Frankfurt, and it was really kind of confusing as to the legality of that at the time. And as well, a bar in Germany recently put its ATM back into operation that had been taken down a long time ago. And so, with seeing a company like this having now the legal ability to build out ATM infrastructure and give a simpler way for people to really get their hands on Bitcoin, as opposed to having to jump through all the hoops of registering at an exchange, doing the whole KYC procedure, and given the very friendly tax laws, whereas like once you've held for a year or more, you can effectively spend it freely as a currency without worrying about capital gains taxes. Like this, I think really is kind of setting the groundwork for a lot of people to start onboarding in Germany. Like it's removing a lot of the friction to getting on board, and really once you pass that year mark, unlike a place like the United States, like you don't have any of the red tape to deal with in terms of spending it. Like you can just spend it and treat it as a currency without having to deal with all the complexities of tracking all the prices you bought something at, and having to deal with capital gains at the end of the year. So I think like this could wind up being a very positive thing in terms of Bitcoin adoption in Germany in the long run.
Yeah, so a bit of background on the local Bitcoin situation in Germany. I think I tweeted about it maybe last year or 2016, but another time where Craig Wright said something very arrogant that he had no idea about. When the whole scaling debate was happening, he was saying that, these times that I visited Berlin, I've noticed that fewer and fewer places are using Bitcoin or accepting Bitcoin. And he equated, like, he said the reason for that was because the blocks are too full or the fees were too high. But really, the reason was because, as Shinobi said, there's not a lot of easy ways to access Bitcoin in Germany outside of just using KYC exchanges. Obviously, there are people who are doing local Bitcoins type activity where they just buy and sell with each other, but they don't obviously there's not a place or a website or anything that they particularly use for that, because local Bitcoins was, I believe, banned in 2014 sometime. And also ATMs, there's almost no ATMs except for that one that popped up recently in Frankfurt. And when that one did pop up in Frankfurt, people were thinking like, well, I don't know how long this is going to last. I didn't actually look who was responsible for that ATM. I don't know if it was this company or not. But yeah, people were worried that it was going to get shut down really fast. And obviously, having one Bitcoin ATM in the entire country is not as helpful as it could be. So yeah, it's definitely a good sign if Germany is being a little more lax about it and willing to let ATMs start popping up more, because that seems to be the trend. Like we saw that one come up in New York. The only thing I'm worried about is that they'll repeat what New York did, which is they gave a bit license to an ATM company, or a company running ATMs, but then they said you have to have all these strict KYC requirements where you had to show a selfie and a driver's license and have a phone number and stuff like that. Uh, I mean, there's going to be a lot more resistance to that in Germany, doing that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that's the kind of requirements that the German government will place on ATMs that start popping up from this company. I don't know if that's going to be as successful if they do a lot of KYC requirements.
Yeah, I got to go through those KYC requirements here, but I mean, like there still is people using local Bitcoins and people moving around Bitcoin, but peer to peer. And yeah, but I mean, I imagine that this investment bank is going to play at least a role in helping shape that. I mean, obviously, probably a pretty big part. I mean, in these investment banks, I don't know how big this investment bank is, but I mean, like, could play a big part in making sure that people do have access to Bitcoin ATMs. So, fingers crossed.
I mean, the potential of like KYC friction is definitely there, but I mean, even if so, I mean, the process would be a lot less nonsense to deal with than an exchange and constantly sending in documents and long wait time. ATM like that would have to be a much quicker procedure. It's not really reasonable to expect somebody to walk up, scan documents or something, and then have to like go home and wait for an approval. Like it has to be something that can be done seamlessly there at the ATM, and then act with your Bitcoin at the end of it.
I love how the troll box is treating the view count like a price.
I know, man. I'm just like looking at it, it's like, oh, we found our support. We're going to new all-time highs. It's a joke though, guys. It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny, but yeah, it's kind of getting some of us a little upset. But it's all right. It's just
Yeah, Max Stream Pro, you are not going to get any money from us, you fucking moron. We do not game metrics. We are not going to pay you. So fuck off. Thank you.
crazy that that's the way they do it. Is they're like, oh, look, we can do this. We can make money. It's get out of here, man.
All right, so last story up. I think we're going to run a little under time today. The Lightning Network has recently passed 4,000 public nodes. And Woohoo! Or, I'm sorry, 4,000 nodes total, with around 2,900 public. And there's really no way to identify nodes that are completely hidden. But this brings us up to a total network capacity of 112 Bitcoin, so around $709,000. And I mean, it's not really the best metric, as we don't really have any indication of liquidity allocations and total possible payments out of that. But I mean, it's still like something to celebrate. Like, this is still a protocol that's being actively developed and a hell of a lot of work to be done, but it's still continuing to grow and still, getting more and more usable. I mean, like, every time I look, I see more shops and more places to pay with things in Bitcoin. And I mean, like, when I was in Germany, in Berlin for the Lightning Hackathon, Room 77 actually integrated Lightning payments like right after the hackathon that night. I'm still pissed that nobody told me this while I was at the hackathon, because I didn't have time to load up my Lightning wallet to pay with it. But I mean, things are really streaming along. Like, there's like the watchtower support in LND is now actively being worked on, which will allow receives over mobile wallets. Like, there's still a ton of things being worked out and improved in the spec. And like, at the end of the day, when all of this gets fleshed out, we still have L2 to roll out if we can push through a soft fork for SIG hash, no input, which is going to be a huge improvement in terms of how much data users' wallets and watchtowers have to keep track of. Like, it's going to enable actual practical work on channel factories and starting to flesh out the problems with that. I mean, like, there is going to be a steady curve of improvement for a long time to come. And it's just really fucking awesome to see how far it's come since mainnet went live.
Do we have any idea how many Bcash nodes are still left? Or how many because I mean, we know everyone's watching the hash rate, but I want to know, like, what are the nodes doing on each side of the Bcash fork?
Nodes don't matter, man.
Yeah, they don't matter, but I still want to see it, because I can bet you that there are more Lightning nodes than Bcash nodes.
I'll bet you 10,000 fake Satoshis you're right.
10,000 testnet Satoshis.
Yeah, can you imagine if because now people are starting to talk in terms of Satoshis instead of Bitcoin. So are Bcashers going to call them fake Satoshis?
Yeah, I would. Maybe they would just call them Fatoshis,
Mm-hmm. Oh man, but it's like, it's really like, this is just fucking impressive as hell. Like, atomics or submarine swaps between payment channels and Lightning are really looking like they're going to be ready. Hopefully, by the time watchtowers are out there for normal people to use, like, that will help with some liquidity issues. And it's like, once those watchtowers hit, like, end user wallets can really start getting tweaked in terms of improving usability, removing anything that might confuse like non-technical users, and we can really start moving forward with this. Like,
Yeah, man. Going back to just Lightning nodes and getting that all moving forward. It's incredible to see that just like jump up over this past year. 4,000 nodes. We've had like a few hack days, and like the amount of stuff that's been churned out there is incredible. And I've seen some interesting stuff. We saw Satoshi's place way back, but now we're starting to see some things with like Lightning chess and being able to put some financial incentive there for winning a game of chess, and all these different little like vending machine Lightning. Stuff is really coming forward, and I get excited when we're in the mumble, and you hear some people talking about, oh, I'm having some trouble with my Lightning node, or I'm syncing it here, or I just set up that BTC Pay server or my Electrum personal server. It's awesome that it's all getting fleshed out, and gets me excited. Yeah, I guess you were wrecked, man. Sorry.
well, I guess that leaves us 10 minutes to go for final thoughts, unless anybody's got anything more to say on Lightning.
No, I was gonna say a final thought, just to give a heads up to anybody. who's watching, maybe some of those robots. We got a couple of meetups here in the area coming up. We got the Boulder Valley Bitcoin meetup at a local pub here tomorrow evening, and there's the Bitcoin and Beer meetup in Denver on November 20th. And there is also this interesting little event at CU going on this weekend about a Techstars startup, decentralized startup, which I might go check out too. So yeah, those things are going on. And also just grab your stomach, guys. We're going low, but that's all right. Grab your stomach and your wallets.
I don't even want
Dan
anybody
Darkpill.
to. Yeah, Dan Darkpill is
Where
back.
are you?
Yeah, he's wrong. We're not going to get through this. Stop giving them false hope, Dan.
What? Guys, seriously, I don't even want people to send me messages about the price unless it hits 5,000. Like, don't even tell me because I don't care.
You just might.
The lower it goes, the more Bitcoin I get when I get paid.
That's what I'm thinking. Just dollar cost average every bump down.
Mm-hmm. All right, Janine. So, explain your thoughts.
So this is a funny thing that I saw, I think it was yesterday. So if anyone has been following the situation between Google and everyone in Berlin who really does not want Google to come to Berlin, there was a lot of protests in the last several months because Google was thinking about establishing a campus in Berlin, specifically in Kreuzberg, which really did not want Google to come. They literally occupied the space that were at least one of the spaces that Google was planning to use, and they were successful in keeping Google out of Kreuzberg. And apparently now the district of Lichtenberg is offering a building, an alternative building for Google to use in Berlin. And it just happens to be the old Stasi, which is the secret service that was in power during the GDR. It's the old Stasi building that has been empty and for some reason has not been turned into a historical site for, all of the surveillance atrocities that inspired the movie The Lives of Others. Apparently they won't offer it to Google. And on some level, I actually think it's perfect because Google may actually end up becoming the modern Stasi if it isn't already. So I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like the symbology of it would almost be worth just letting Google have it because it would just be so hilarious.
Yeah, I think that would be funny. I mean, like, I kind of get sickened because, Google's a little local here, and I've seen them building out these little headquarters. And to me, it's just it's like a McDonald's CIA. It's just like, it's like a CIA that's friendly for you to walk in and talk to them and look at their, I don't even know if you could walk in there, but I mean, they make it look all like, just like, oh, it's a great place to hang out.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw this tweet, like the image popped in my head of someone doing a remake of The Lives of Others, which if you haven't seen that movie, it's a great movie, available. I mean, it's obviously in German, but you can watch it with English subtitles. I can see someone making a remake of Lives of Others with Google as the Stasi and like the consequences of surveillance and how it may affect Google employees. We're having this whole walkout thing. We could have that in the remake and yeah. Oh, and it appears that we have our own Google problem because YouTube has no support email anymore for reporting spammers or view count spammers. So, yeah.
On our own, man.
Fake. Hey, can we title our next show Fake Views?
No.
Fake views off by one.
I'm waiting for the Donald Trump tweet that says fake views.
Oh my god. Like, fucking scammer pieces of shit. Like, you're not getting any money from us. Fuck off. Like, I know half of these views are still fake.
Maybe not quite half. But what's your final thought? Sorry.
Well, nothing. Fuck you Max Stream Pro, get fucked. You're wasting your time because you're not going to get any money out of us. And then I guess hopefully we'll be doing a fork live stream tomorrow, although all
No.
the details are still up in the air. We might have some more people with us if we do it, and
It might not
don't
happen.
don't be angry if it doesn't happen, because I'm going to have to now try to throw all the details and shit together when I get off the air, and I might get lazy and not give a shit.
Yeah, and plus, I don't know, sometimes it takes like 24 hours, 48 hours before you really start getting the actual news on this stuff. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
I would like to not
Yes, on
attend
that
the live
note.
stream of a slap fight. People are calling this a war. It's a slap fight.
Yeah,
And also,
that's true.
it appears that the Commerce Block Brigader has now left the troll box, maybe, or he's just quiet. But I would like to end the show by saying that Shinobi is more of a ninja, as Blake said on Twitter. Shinobi is more of a ninja than any of you will ever be.
True that.
All right. On that note, toodaloo, everybody. We will see you maybe tomorrow, and if not, Sunday. Adios.